bother to work in it. You think that's a valid objection? What about those that don't want to work?
Well, it's an interesting concept. Actually, this is one of the things in which I've differed for some time on with the Paracon people. They basically have the same view. Mike Albert, Robin Hannell, and the others. We've disagreed about this for many years. It's a question of what you think work is. I mean, there is a point of view associated with capitalist systems that holds that work is a burden. If you weren't driven to work, you'd prefer to vegetate. I don't think that has anything to do with human beings. And in fact, it's kind of striking that the people who hold this view, most of them come from the university or scientific backgrounds. Well, you go into, say, the university where I work, MIT, mainly scientific university, and people are working 80 hours a day, 80 hours a week, because they love their work. And their work is under their own control. You know, of all the social institutions, these especially science-based universities are places where you really do control your own work. I mean, you got to meet some conditions, but it's pretty much controlled by participants. So, you know, optimally and in fact often realistically. And under those conditions, people just want to work. The carpenters who love what they're doing and can control it, they work all the time. And in fact, you know, there's an old tradition from the Enlightenment, which is, you know, grew into classical liberalism and finally anarchism, which holds that work should be one of the highest ideals of life. Creative work under your own control. And I think most people know that that's true. When you have an opportunity to do creative work under your own control, especially if it has some social purpose and so on, you know, it's the best thing to do. It's a lot better than, you know, lying on a couch and watching a boring television program. So I just think it's it's a concept of work that comes out of capitalist ideology, which says people have to be driven to work. Actually, it's very interesting to watch the debates about this. It's debated in mainstream circles, not so much in these terms, but take a look at the debates about taxation of the wealthy. The standard argument against taxing the wealthy is, well, if you put high taxes on the wealthy, they're not going to do anything. And they're the ones who invest and make things happen and so on and so forth. Now, the people who press this most are economists. And sometimes it's almost comical. There was an article, one of the major journals, by a well-known Harvard economist, liberal economist, Greg Mankiw, wrote the major texts. And he argued, he said, look, you can't, he's kind of a liberal, he says you can't tax the rich because they're not going to do anything. And then there's no economic theory behind it or any other theory, but he gives an example of himself. He says, well, if I didn't have a high salary, I wouldn't do anything. You'd never get anyone in a university saying that except from an economics department. And that's because the ideology is so built in, they can't think. They can't look at the next office and see that the guy's in the lab all day because he loves what he's doing. Of course, people want to do meaningful work, especially if they can run it themselves. The Paracon position that I've disagreed with is they believe that remuneration ought to be proportional to input. You know, the harder you work, the more you should be paid. But I think that's a very demeaning conception of not only of what work is, but what human beings are like. And I don't even think it's true. You know, in fact, they themselves work very hard and they don't get paid for it. So are they different from other people? You know.